0, 20, 40, 60, 80 ABV. How does that affect the flavor? Hello and welcome back to another Beaver Brew Day, and today we are talking about how the ABV that you age your spirit at affects the flavor. So in front of me I have the jars that I prepared and rapid aged over 3 days. It has now gone through about 7 to 8, I think it's 8 full hot and cold cycles. Yes, I do know this is not the ideal way to test it, but it is a short experiment that I've been wanting to do for a while now. So before I get carried away, let me just explain what the whole premise and the idea is behind this. First off, how did we start? We started with a high proof 92% ABV sugar wash. Or a vodka from a sugar wash. So we started with a sugar wash. If you want to see 5 tips on how to improve your sugar washes, please check the video card up top here, where I go over my 5 tips that I use to make sure my sugar washes ferment out really quickly and give me a very good product. We then distilled it, running it through our still, running the column full of packing, running it with quite a lot of reflux, and at the end of the day we took it off at 95% and ended taking, or we started taking off at 95%, and the last jar we added was at 82%. So everything added together, we ended up with 92% ABV spirit with a very neutral flavor. And just to remind myself of the flavor, what we're going to do is we're going to test it just now, just to see what kind of flavors we have. Cool. Then what I did is I cut equal pieces of wood, equal size, equal weight, more focused on the weight, less on the size, and added it into the jars. What we have is we have a jar of 0% ABV or water. We have a jar of 20% ABV, a jar of 40% ABV, a jar of 60% ABV, a jar of 80% ABV, and then a 40% control. Now why the 40% control and not just straight from this product? Because this spirit went through a hot and cold cycle, or a rapid age cycle. If you want to see how to do rapid aging, I did a video a while ago on a couple of different methods that we use to rapid age our spirits. So yeah, feel free to check that video out. The reason for the 40% control is I wanted exactly the same thing that happened to this spirit to happen to our controller as well. So the hot and cold cycles, should anything have changed in the spirit. Why a neutral spirit? I wanted to see what the wood does to the spirit and not what the spirit does to the wood flavors. So I wanted to see what kind of flavors I can pull out of the wood using a neutral spirit, to ensure that the only flavors that are imparted into the spirit from the wood comes from the wood and not from the spirit. Because the general idea and consensus that I was able to find by looking through the forums and asking a couple of questions on different groups is that your Goldilocks zone for aging a spirit is between 50 and 60%. Within that range, you do pull out the barrel tannin or the barrel flavors, the wood flavors, as well as the sweet flavors. So up until about 55, you get predominantly sweet flavors, meaning your wood sugars, your vanillas, your caramels, those kind of deals. And then the moment you go past 55 to above 60, you start pulling out the tannic flavors, so the astringent wood flavors, and that is what I want to test. So Future Beaver just introduced me, Past Beaver. So we ran this still nice and slowly to ensure we have as neutral as possible of a flavor, so that there is almost no to little effect on the flavors that we're going to pull from the wood, so we can see what kind of flavors we get from the wood at different ABVs. The product we will be using is the one in front of us here. We started off at a 95% with the 4 shots and heads. So we moved into the jars as we have it in front of us. We started with a 95%, jar 2 at 95, jar 3 at 92, jar 4 at 92, jar 5 at 92, jar 6 at 89, and jar 7 at 82. So the flavors coming off of this stuff is almost all ethanol. So there is very little to no flavor. So if there is some flavor, I might be leaning towards a bit of a green apple for me. But yeah, other than that, it's as neutral as we're gonna get it. So what we want to do now is we just want to quickly prepare our 6 different samples that we're going to be running. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different samples, because one's going to be a control. So yeah, let's get into the mixing. So with all the jars mixed and proofed down to 0, 20, 40, 60, 80 and a 40% control, we are going to add the wood in at exactly the same moment or as close as we can, and we will then age all of these, rapid age them for 3 cycles from hot to cold, and then we'll pop over to Future Beaver again, that will be doing the tasting to see what flavors we got out of this. We also have a 40% control sample that will go through exactly the same process with no wood added to see if the flavor changes. So what we're going to do now is take off all the lids. All the wood is exactly the same in weight, so they might differ in size a little bit, but they're all exactly the same in weight. So what we're going to do is just add them in to our product, get the lids on. And yes, it is a lot of wood for a very little bit of spirits, but we want the wood impact to be as big as possible. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to take these samples, put them into a hot water bath for about 2 hours, take them out into the fridge for an hour, and then rapid age these to get as much of the flavor out of the wood as possible in the shortest amount of time. Let's start off with tasting our neutral. When this came off the still and when we mixed it, as you saw in the B-roll now, it had the taste of green apple, or the smell of green apple, just a slight hint of green apple, but it was very ethanol forward. Right now, as I opened the jar, the flavor that came up was almost a caramel sugar kind of flavor. But yeah, still a slight hint of green apple at the back there. I'm going to take a tiny bit because this is still at 92%, and then just proof it down. So as it is right now, the flavor of apple is gone. That caramel flavor is gone, and you literally smell, I think I smell more of the water than I do of the spirit. So it's pretty neutral. On the taste as well, slight hint of that apple coming back, but yeah, there's absolutely nothing else. It tastes like water with a tiny bit of burn going down. Now what we want to do quickly is test our control version. I haven't opened, tasted or smelled any of this beforehand, so the jars are still pretty much vacuum sealed shut from the hot and cold cycles. So the 40% started at 92 as we saw, was proved down to 40% with exactly the same water in the jar itself. Yeah, I don't smell anything. Maybe a slight hint of sugar, like a caramelized sugar type of deal. So yeah, the 40% very close with a slight change between the original spirit and this. It did mellow out the harsh ethanol layer that I have in this when I just proof it down. So going through that heat and cold cycle, it did change the flavor a tiny bit, but not a lot. It still tastes like nothing. It's time to go into the experiment. So the idea behind it is that water is also a solvent, and the more water content you have in your ethanol content, or the more water to ethanol or the more ethanol to water, it should pull out different flavors. And as I said before, 55% is about that tipping point. So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen between 40 and 60% if there is a massive change in flavor. First, let's discuss color. The 0% is a very light yellow color, and this is just pure water. But there is a slight color difference between the 20% and the 0%. The 0 to the 40%, you can see a drastic change in color. Going from 0 to 60%, there's another big jump in color, and this has now gone almost orange. And then 80%. So 80%, strangely enough, compared to the 0%, has a nice orangey umber yellow glow to it, but compared to the 60, it is actually slightly lighter. So something did change between that 60 and that 80% ABV that brought it closer to the 0% ABV in colors. Now let's start off with the 0%. This is going to be like a toasted oak soup. So just straight water, same water that everything was diluted down with. What we're going to do is grab a little bit in our glass. On the nose you get wood, like wet wood. Not surprising, it's water and wood, but no sweet, nothing. It actually smells like tea. That tastes like caramel. That's weird. This has a very woody flavor, no taking that away, but it tastes like caramel. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Now for the 20%. Okay, so on the nose, once again, caramel. It's very caramel forward. Less of that wet foliage smell. That is almost custard caramel flavor. Tastes like frozen yogurt, caramel frozen yogurt. What's actually going through my head now is if I age my spirits, depending on what the top ones give me, if I age my spirits on a high ABV to get that tannic flavors, I can take a little bit, age it on a low ABV and use that to cut my spirit down, and that will add the sweet flavors in. We'll taste that later on. But yeah, theory holds water. Anything below 55 this far has only pulled sweet, in this case caramel flavor though. 40%. Okay, the 40% on the nose, as I open the jar, it's starting to push into those wood note flavors that we are all familiar with when you're aging your spirits. So on this, it's very sweet. That caramel sweetness that I picked up in the original spirit, it does come to the foreground, that burnt sugar type of deal. You're starting to get the ethanol layer close to the flavors that we are used to. Has that slight hint of wood, so that slight almost bitter note of the wood, we just followed with a big gush of that sweet caramel vanilla flavors that you normally get from oh, I didn't even mention this. This is American white oak toasted at 220 degrees for 3 hours. The reason for that toast is I wanted to pull those sweet caramel vanilla flavors out of the wood. Still very sweet, not tannic yet, but you do start to get those wood flavors. So for the 60%, what I am planning on doing is drinking it neat. I'm not going to proof it down. The 80% I might have to proof down so I don't blow up my palate. But at least for the 60%, I am not going to proof it down to get as much of the flavor out as possible. So if the 60% does taste way too much like ethanol and can't pick up much flavors, what I'll do is I'll add a couple of drops of water to it just to bring some of those flavors to the foreground. Strange on the nose, this smells a lot sweeter than the 40%. It's closer to the 20% on the nose. Also very strange, it has less of an ethanol layer than the 40%. The 40% had more of an ethanol layer. If you don't know what I mean about ethanol layer, it's that sharp, almost burning kind of sensation in your nose when you smell ethanol. Sweet on the nose, very sweet, but on the palate itself, you started to pull those tannic flavors. Now the caramel starts coming in. It's actually my favorite in taste balance. Now for the big boy. The big boy is at 80%. I'm not going to drink it neat. That is just going to blow out my palate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to proof it down with a couple of drops, but I'm going to nose it at 80. Okay, yeah, on the 80% I can almost smell nothing except the ethanol layer. It's now starting to become thunder tasting. Almost made a mistake there. Okay, there we go. Added a couple of drops of water. It's almost like wood varnish. Almost no sweet. The sweet has taken a back seat. It does come back with a hint of caramel as it lingers in your mouth. It lingers a lot longer than the lower proofs. Nice, and that astringent peppery flavor in the front, and then it moves into the caramel at the end. The theory holds water, at least in this small experiment, and with the rapid aging, there's a massive jump in flavor difference between the 40 and the 60% and the 80%, where the 40% is all sweet and like your vanillas and your caramels and your sugars and that type of stuff. It smells like that, hot sugar, and tastes very sweet. So your 40% downwards, I was very impressed with the 20 and the 0. But from 60 to 80, it started going very tannic, started adding those deep, rich wood flavors, and the 80% you started touching the pepper and that type of stuff. I think if it was aged a little bit longer, then yes, you might start getting into those very wood furniture, because you started getting those wood furniture type of smells out of it. Just to elaborate on what I said before, I'm definitely going to try and age at least one of my spirits at a very high ABV, like 80%, and then once it's aged at 80%, I'll have a little bit on the side aged at 20%, and then add those two together and use the 20% to proof down the 80% and see if those sweet, very sweet caramel flavors pull through. I will definitely be leaving these jars for a couple of months and then going back to them periodically to test the flavors that as they develop naturally without the forced aging. For those that are avid watchers of the channel and that has sticked around to the end, there is a collaboration coming up with Bearded and Bored soon. Stick around for that. It is going to be super interesting. Really looking forward to working with that legend. As always, thank you very much for sticking around and have a lekker day.